At my wedding, my father stood up and said, "She's not my daughter. A bastard like her doesn't deserve a wedding gift." The room fell silent. Forks froze midair. My heart sank into my stomach. I stood there, in my white dress, surrounded by love yet suddenly more alone than ever. But then, my grandmother rose from her seat. She didn't shout. She didn't scold. She simply walked across the aisle with slow, steady steps and handed my father a sealed envelope. He hesitated, opened it. "Read the first line," and collapsed. Just like that. His face drained of color. His heart gave out. People screamed. Someone called 911. But I just stood there. Because in that moment, I understood something. Truth doesn't scream. It arrives quiet, unshakable, and changes everything. My name is Sophia Whitmore. This is the story of how I lost a father and found everything else. I was born in a small town outside Eugene, Oregon, in late spring, when the cherry blossoms were still hanging on. My mother, I was told, died not long after giving birth. At least, that's what my father always said, though he never looked me in the eye when he said it. Growing up, I was always the extra, the leftover, the mistake no one said aloud but everyone felt. My stepmother, Janice, came into our lives when I was only 3, and from day one, she made it clear, I was not hers, I was not wanted, and I was not welcome. She had a sharp tongue and a colder heart. "You're not like my Nathan," she'd say with a condescending smile. Nathan was her golden boy, my younger half-brother. He got birthday parties, new clothes, piano lessons, and warm hugs. Me, I got indifference. Or, worse, disgust. Once, when I brought home a school certificate for a writing contest I'd won, Janice barely glanced at it. "That's nice," she muttered, tossing it onto the counter like junk mail. My father didn't even ask what it was. He was always tired, always distant. Some days, I wondered if he resented me for surviving. By the time I was 10, I had learned 3 rules. Don't ask questions. Don't expect kindness. Don't ever believe you matter. At school, I tried to disappear. I sat in the back of classrooms, never raised my hand, never brought attention to myself. My teachers liked me. I was quiet. I worked hard. But I never invited anyone over. I couldn't. There was nothing in that house I wanted anyone else to see, especially not the way Janice looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. But there was one person who looked at me differently. My grandmother, Mabel Whitmore. She lived about 20 minutes away, in an old white house with a sloping porch and a backyard that smelled like lavender and basil. I used to ride my bike there on weekends when Janice was hosting real family dinners I wasn't included in. With Mabel, I was just Sophia. Not the outsider. Not the mistake. Just a girl who liked books, tea, and drawing. She always saved the corner seat at the kitchen table for me. She'd pour me hot cocoa with extra whipped cream and ask questions no one else ever had. "What are you reading lately? What would you write about if the whole world was listening? Do you ever dream in color?" Those moments kept me alive. And yet even in her warmth, I never once told her what Janice said behind closed doors. I never dared repeat the word my father once let slip in a moment of rage. Bastard. I was 8. I didn't even know what it meant. But I knew how it made me feel. Like I didn't belong anywhere. Not in that house. Not in that name. Not in this family. But Mabel made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could belong to myself. Mabel's backyard wasn't big, but to me, it was magic. A crooked stone path led from her porch to a tucked-away garden hidden behind a patch of lilac bushes. There was an old wooden bench under a dogwood tree, a wind chime made of seashells that whispered when the breeze passed, and rows of lavender, thyme, and snapdragons that Mabel tended like precious secrets. We called it the secret garden, though there was no gate, no walls, and no one ever told me to keep out. It was the only place in the world where I could breathe deeply, where no one judged how I looked, how quiet I was, or how I tiptoed through life trying not to break anything. I'd sit cross-legged on the grass, scribbling in my notebook while Mabel gardened nearby with her floppy sun hat and dirt-caked gloves. "What are you writing today?" she'd ask. "Maybe a story," I'd mumble. "About a girl who disappears but no one notices." She'd pause, look at me gently, and say, "Then make sure she comes back stronger." That line stuck with me. In that garden, I began to draw too. Not just doodles but full stories and pictures. Girls with wings, girls with swords, girls who spoke to trees, girls who burned down the castles that caged them. I never showed those drawings to Janice. She once found one in my backpack and tossed it in the trash. "Stop wasting time," she said. "Art doesn't feed mouths." But Mabel, she bought me sketchbooks and watercolor pens on my birthdays. "It's not just art," she said. "It's survival." When I was 12, I overheard Janice complaining to my father. "She's not mine. Why do we have to keep feeding her?" He didn't defend me. He just said, "She's here." That's all. That night, I biked to Mabel's, heart pounding, eyes wet. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a blanket, set a mug of tea in my hands, and walked me to the garden. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "one day, you'll bloom in a place they can't touch. You hear me?" I nodded, trying not to cry. She smiled. "Good. Because I see the roots, and they're strong." I don't know when it became clear to me that Mabel was more mother than anyone else ever had been, but it was around then, in those quiet evenings where words weren't needed, where she hummed while watering her plants, and I curled up with a book under the dogwood tree. The secret garden became my quiet rebellion. It was where I dared to imagine a world where I wasn't disposable, where I wasn't a burden, where I wasn't a bastard. It was where Sophia, the real Sophia, began to grow. And though I didn't know it yet, that garden would be the very place I'd return to one last time before everything changed. By the time I turned 16, I had learned how to live invisibly. I earned straight A's. I volunteered. I washed the dishes without being asked. I made sure my name never showed up on any complaint. I was the perfect non-problem in a household that only ever celebrated Nathan. He got a car when he turned 16. I got a pat on the back for folding the laundry right. When he failed a math test, Janice blamed the teacher. When I aced mine, she said, "Don't get cocky." I remember one night, sitting at the dinner table, Nathan excitedly announced he wanted to apply to an expensive summer program for coding. Janice and my father beamed. "That's our boy," Dad said proudly. "Future genius." Then I said quietly, "I got accepted to a writing residency in Portland. They're offering a full scholarship." The silence was louder than any slap. Janice blinked. "Who even reads anymore?" I stopped talking after that. But in the privacy of my bedroom, under the glow of my desk lamp, I began to write letters. To my mother. "Dear Mom, I don't know if you would have liked tea or coffee. I don't know if you danced when you cleaned, or if you liked silence. But I miss you. Even if I never really knew you. I think I just miss the idea that someone might have once chosen me. Love, Sophia." I wrote dozens of letters over the years. I hid them under my mattress, like secrets I wasn't brave enough to speak. Sometimes I'd bring them to Mabel's, tuck them beneath the lavender bush in the garden, as if the earth might carry them to wherever my mother rested. Once, I tried asking my father directly. It was late. He'd just gotten home from work. I stood at the kitchen counter while he opened the fridge. "Dad," I began, "can you tell me about her? About Mom?" He didn't turn around. "You were too young," he said flatly. "There's nothing to tell." But he slammed the fridge shut. "She's gone. Let her stay that way." That night, I biked to Mabel's again. She met me at the porch with her robe and slippers already on. "I tried asking about her," I said, my voice shaking. Mabel looked at me for a long moment, then placed a wrinkled envelope in my hand. It was sealed. On the front, in elegant, almost fading script, "For Sophia, when she's ready." My heart stilled. "Why haven't you given this to me before?" I whispered. Because pain is like fire, she said. Too early and it burns you, too late and it burns everything else. I didn't open it. Not yet. I wasn't ready. But I knew one day that letter would either break me or set me free. And until then, I'd keep surviving. Quietly, invisibly. But one day I promised myself I would be more than just the girl they tolerated. I would become someone they could never ignore again. I met Marcus on a Tuesday at a used bookstore downtown. He was crouched in the poetry aisle, flipping through a torn copy of Sylvia Plath's journals, and muttering, "Why does every copy smell like regret?" I laughed out loud. It surprised both of us. He looked up, smiled, and said, "Hi, I'm Marcus, and apparently I make strangers laugh in sad poetry sections." We ended up talking for 2 hours that day, about words, about art, about the way certain songs feel like home and certain silences feel like cages. I didn't tell him about my family. Not then, not yet. But he didn't ask for a history. He asked for coffee, and I said yes. Our relationship wasn't a thunderstorm, it was sunlight through curtains, gentle, gradual, healing. He didn't try to fix me, he just stayed. And over time, I stopped apologizing for existing. The first time he came to pick me up from my father's house, Janice opened the door and stared at him like he was mold on fine china. "You're dating her?" she said, blinking in disbelief. Marcus just smiled and replied, "Yes. And I'm the lucky one." I'd never seen Janice speechless. Over the next 2 years, Marcus became my safe place. When he held my hand, the echoes of "bastard" and "not mine" in my head grew quieter. When he looked at me, I felt like maybe I was enough. Not because of who I was trying to be, but because of who I already was. On my 27th birthday, we were sitting on the porch of Mabel's house, watching the wind move through her lavender bushes. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small, square box, and said, "I know where you come from hurts, but I also know who you are, and I want to build something new with you. Will you marry me, Sophia?" I said yes with tears in my eyes, and a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying, slowly lifting from my chest. We started planning a small wedding, nothing extravagant. Just close friends, a riverside ceremony, and the people who mattered. Mabel, of course, would walk me down the aisle. She was the only one who ever truly raised me. But as the invitations were being finalized, Marcus gently asked the question I'd been dreading. "Will you invite your parents?" I flinched. "They're not really my parents." He nodded, thought for a moment. "Then do it for you, so you can stand there on that day, knowing you owed them nothing but still rose above everything." His words stayed with me. A week later, I dropped off 2 envelopes at the house on Pine Street, one addressed to Edmund Whitmore and one to Janice. I didn't expect them to come, but part of me feared they would. And a deeper partone I never said out loud feared what they might do if they did. The morning of my wedding was quiet. Golden light filtered through my apartment window as Mabel helped me into my dress. It was simply Ivory satin, long sleeves, a delicate row of buttons down the back. I didn't want glamour. I wanted honesty. And peace. "You look like your mother," Mabel whispered, smoothing my veil. I swallowed. I hope she'd be proud. "She would be," she said with no hesitation. "She already is." The venue was a small riverside restaurant, tucked between rows of oak trees. Wildflowers lined the aisle. A friend played piano softly as guests arrived. Marcus stood at the altar in a navy blue suit, eyes searching for me the moment I stepped into view. And when he saw me, he smiled like the world had paused. Mabel held my hand as we walked down the aisle. Not a dry eye in the crowd. My breath caught in my throat as I looked into Marcus's eyes. For once, I believed this could be mine, this joy, this moment, this new beginning. The ceremony was short and sweet. We exchanged vows, slipped on rings, and kissed under a sky that hadn't decided whether to rain or shine. Then came the speeches. First, my best friend spoke. Then Marcus's sister. Then the MC smiled and said, "And now, a few words from the father of the bride." My stomach dropped. I had included Edmund's name on the program out of formality. I never thought he'd actually stand up. But he did. Slowly, Edmund walked to the front. Janice followed behind him, lips tight. Nathan wasn't there, he never RSVP'd. Edmund adjusted the microphone, looked around the room, looked at me. And then he said it. "She's not my daughter." Gasps rippled across the room. My ears rang. I couldn't move. He continued, calmly, like reading a memo. "She's a bastard. Her mother lied to me. This whole marriage is built on deception, and a bastard like her doesn't deserve a wedding gift." A silence fell so heavy it threatened to crush me. Guests shifted in their chairs. Some looked down. Some stared at me. I couldn't feel my feet, or my face. Marcus reached for my hand. I gripped his fingers like a lifeline. I couldn't breathe. I saw Janice in the front row, her lips curled into a smirk, like she'd been waiting for this moment for years. But then, a chair scraped back. Mabel stood. She didn't raise her voice, didn't rush. She walked slowly toward Edmund, holding something in her hand. A pale blue envelope. When she reached him, she looked him dead in the eye and placed it firmly in his palm. No words, no theatrics. Just a gesture that felt sharper than any scream. Edmund blinked, opened it. Inside was a single folded document. His hands trembled as he read it. Then his skin went gray. His lips parted, as if to speak, but no sound came. And then, he collapsed. The microphone hit the floor with a harsh bang. Someone screamed. Another person shouted, "Call 911. But I just stood there, frozen. Because somewhere deep inside me, I knew this moment had always been coming. Time didn't slow down. It shattered. Edmund collapsed right there on the wooden floor beneath the microphone stand. His face drained of color. His fingers still clutched the envelope Mabel had given him, now crumpled and wet with sweat. Gasps turned to screams. A server dropped a tray. Someone near the door began dialing 911. Chairs scraped back. People surged forward. Janice dropped to her knees beside him, slapping his face, her voice shrill. "Edmund, breathe! Come on, you stubborn old man!" But he didn't respond. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Couldn't cry. Marcus was gripping my arm, whispering, "It's okay, Sophia. You're okay. I'm here." But I wasn't okay. I wasn't even there. I was back in my childhood bedroom, 8 years old, hearing Edmund say the word bastard for the first time. I was 10, standing in the kitchen, invisible beside Nathan's birthday cake. I was 16, handing my father a college acceptance letter he never opened. And now, he was lying in the middle of my wedding floor, felled not by violence, but by truth. The EMTs arrived quickly. They moved with calm urgency, checking vitals, loading Edmund onto a stretcher. They asked Janice questions, but she was too hysterical to answer. Mabel, standing to the side with her back straight and her jaw clenched, stepped forward. "Tell the hospital he has a heart condition, atrial fibrillation, and he hasn't been taking his medication." Her voice was crisp, commanding. The voice of a woman who'd lived through storms and learned to name every kind of thunder. The EMT nodded. Then they wheeled Edmund out. The reception doors swung shut behind them, and a sudden, uncanny quiet fell over the room. No music, no laughter. Just stunned guests staring at a wedding brought to its knees. And in the middle of it all stood Mabel, holding another envelope. She turned toward the crowd, her eyes scanning every face until they landed on mine. "May I speak?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. The MC hesitated, then gave a slow, stunned nod. Mabel stepped forward and took the microphone from the floor. Her voice didn't shake, not once. "My name is Mabel Whitmore. I am the grandmother of the bride." She looked straight at Janice, whose face had gone ghostly white. "And I have been silent for far too long." She held up the second envelope. "This contains documentation of what you all just witnessed, why Edmund collapsed. It's not just the shock. It's the truth he tried to bury for almost 3 decades. She opened the envelope and pulled out 3 items. A copy of a DNA test. A photograph of a woman me mother. A handwritten letter. This DNA test, she said, was taken in secret with the help of a legal investigator. It confirms that Sophia is not biologically related to Edmund Whitmore. A stir in the audience, whispers. But you see, what he never told anyone, Mabel continued, is that he always knew that. Because my daughter Sophia's mother told him before she died. She held up the photograph. This is Rosemary Whitmore, my daughter, Sophia's mother. She was kind, artistic, fragile. She was forced into a loveless marriage with Edmund after she became pregnant with Sophia by the man she loved, a man Edmund considered beneath her. I felt the air leave my lungs. I didn't know this. Not all of it. Mabel opened the letter. This is Rosemary's letter to Sophia, written days before she passed. I've kept it all these years. I thought protecting her meant silence. I was wrong. She began to read. My dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, it means you've grown into the woman I knew you would be. I'm sorry I couldn't stay to see it. You were never a mistake. You were born from love, real, deep, fierce love. But I was afraid. I was weak. And I didn't fight hard enough. Forgive me. I hope one day, someone will tell you the truth. That you are not Edmund's burden. You are my daughter. And you are worthy of everything good this life can offer. With all my love, Mom. The entire room had gone silent. I didn't realize I was crying until Marcus gently wiped my cheek. Mabel lowered the letter and said, her voice breaking now, I failed my daughter once. I will not fail her daughter. Then she turned to Janice. Her tone shifted ice now, not sorrow. You called her a burden, a freeloader, a mistake, but the only mistake was thinking your cruelty would never be exposed. Janice stumbled back, her mouth opening, then shutting. No words came. Mabel turned to the guests. This wedding is not ruined. It's just been rewritten. You all came to witness a love story, and you still will. Because Sophia is not just the bride today. She is the survivor of a war none of you saw. She walked off the stage and came toward me, pressed the envelope into my hand. This is yours now, she whispered. All of it. Do with it what you choose. I stared at the worn paper, the letter my mother had written for a day just like this. I looked at Marcus, at Mabel, at the guests who now watched not with pity, but with awe. I straightened my shoulders. Play the music, I said. The pianist blinked. Are you sure? Yes, I said. Because I am. And then I stepped back into the ceremony, eyes red, heart full, spine straight. Not just a bride. A daughter reclaimed. A legacy reborn. The reception didn't resume the way most weddings do. There was no garter toss, no cheesy group dance, no tipsy uncle grabbing the mic. But there was music, and there was truth. I stood before the guests, holding my mother's letter in one hand, Marcus's hand in the other. My dress was wrinkled, my mascara smudged. My voice, when I began to speak, trembled, but it didn't break. Most brides are introduced with their father's blessing, I said softly. I was introduced today with his rejection. The room remained still. But that doesn't define me. Not anymore. I turned slightly, facing Mabel. Her eyes glistened with pride. This woman, I said, is the only one who ever raised me, the one who never saw me as less than. She held space for my pain. She never asked me to earn my worth. She just gave it. I took a deep breath. My chest expanded as if for the first time. And my mother, Rosemary, though gone, has given me one final gift, the truth. I paused. I am not a mistake. I am not a burden. I am not a bastard. I raised the letter gently in the air. I am Sophia Whitmore. I carry my mother's love, my grandmother's fire, and my own name, my own voice. The room erupted in quiet applause. No loud whoops or forced cheers, just something real, warm, respectful, healing. Then, slowly, people began to stand. Friends, cousins, even distant relatives who had once ignored me at holidays. They stood not because they were obligated, but because something in them had shifted. I walked to Marcus, still holding the letter. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just kissed my forehead, held my waist, and whispered, "You're home now." And I was. Later, as the sun dipped low over the river, we cut a modest cacalemon and raspberry, Mabel's favorite. There was no bouquet toss. Just dancing under string lights, arms around friends, whispers of, "You were so brave," and, "Your mother would be proud." Janice didn't return. She had left during the chaos, and I didn't care where she'd gone. For the first time in my life, I felt nothing toward her. No need to explain myself. No need to hurt her back. Just freedom. Edmund remained at the hospital. We received no updates, no texts, no apologies. And I didn't need any. His silence had already spoken loud enough for a lifetime. Later that night, as the last guests drifted home, Mabel handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a ring. Not an engagement ring, but a delicate band with an amethyst stone. "It was your mother's," she said. "She wanted you to wear it when you found your place." I slipped it on beside my wedding band. It shimmered not just with light, but with memory, lineage, and survival. And as I stood there, hand in hand with Marcus, Mabel beside us, laughter rising from the garden, I knew I hadn't just reclaimed a name. I had rewritten its meaning. We didn't go on a honeymoon right away. Instead, we went home to the one that mattered. Mabel stayed with us for a week after the wedding. We turned the guest room into her own sanctuary. Soft blankets, her favorite books, the old quilt she kept folded at the edge of her farm bed. Marcus even built her a small shelf for dried lavender and jam jars. One morning, I woke up early and found her sitting on the balcony with a cup of tea. She was humming to herself, watching the wind move through the trees. "This reminds me of the old garden," she said without turning. I smiled. I was thinking the same. So we planted one. A modest patch in the backyard. Marcus built the raised beds. I chose the soil. Mabel picked the seeds. Lavender, of course. Snapdragons. A row of thyme. A young dogwood sapling in the center. We called it the second garden. Every evening, we'd sit there, just the three of us, watching the light change, the petals open, and something else, something deeper, grow between us. It wasn't just flowers. It was memory. It was legacy. It was peace. One afternoon, while Marcus was grilling and Mabel was knitting beside me, I finally opened the rest of the letter from my mother. The last paragraph had been folded beneath the page, unread until that moment. "Sophia, I don't know the woman you'll become. But I hope she's gentle with herself. I hope she loves without apology. I hope she builds a life that makes her feel safe. And if she ever wonders where she comes from, tell her this. She comes from fire. And fire does not apologize for burning." I wept. Not because I was sad, but because, finally, I wasn't. Weeks passed. Then, months. Life became simple, full of grocery lists, shared recipes, long walks, and quiet weekends. News from Edmund came in pieces. He survived the heart attack but never fully recovered. His speech remained slurred. His business collapsed. Janice left shortly after. Nathan resurfaced once, sent a text that said, "Sorry things got weird." I never replied. Closure didn't come with apologies. It came with no longer needing them. Mabel passed away quietly in her sleep a year later. I found her curled in her chair, a book still open on her lap, a photo of my mother tucked into the pages. We buried her under the dogwood tree in our garden. And every spring since, the lavender has bloomed brighter. Marcus and I kept living, loving, building. Sometimes, I still think of the girl I used to be, the one who sat alone in a secret garden, wishing someone would choose her. And I wish I could reach back, take her hand, and whisper, "Just wait. One day, you'll bloom in a place they can't touch." And she'll believe me. Because I'm living it now. This is my garden. and it's finally mine.